felt an affront, not just as an African American, but as a trained actor, to have the presumption that you can get in front of a camera without training is bullshit.
In a business where mainstream is your meal ticket, commercial success is your hope, and the opportunity to portray deep, dark, layered characters on stage and screen is your one true passion, then Tony Todd has a life and career most actors only dream of. This is Tony Todd. In his words, told to Fangoria's Tony Timpone, this is his Screamography. Growing up in idyllic New England, Todd is the product of suburbia. His passion for the stage, acting, and horror developed at a very young age.
And I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut, which was, New England, man. I go back like once a year. I'm a New England Patriot fan. Go Pates, go Pats, yeah. It was great, for a normal kid, believe it to be a very kind of environment. Lower middle class, got to spend a lot of time in libraries. I was an only child, so I got to read a lot of imaginative books when I was a child, which kind of fostered my whole, background in terms of fantasy and stuff. Comic book collector,
Began his film career making $50 a week, cutting movie trailers for New World Pictures for his idol and mentor, Roger Corman.
A friend of mine was working for Roger Corman in the publicity department doing trailers, and so I was invited to come out and maybe, make trailers, and so I came out to try my hand, thinking, well, if it doesn't work out, I'll go back east or whatever. But it was just one of those flyers that people take, and I found that I had a facility for it. I had put together a film when I was in college called The Movie Orgy, which was a 7-hour compilation film made out of found pieces of footage from all sorts of stuff that I didn't have the rights to, that we used to go to college campuses and show. And so I had, in 16 millimeter at least, I had developed some facility for editing. And I found that when I was asked to do trailers for a movie, and nobody told me how to do it, I mean, they basically gave me a print of a film. They said, here's a movieola, come out with a trailer. And that's the way it worked over at Corman's. I mean, basically, it was sink or swim.
Thrown in, Dante had to eventually figure everything. His first trailer for New World was for the film Caged Head, directed by the talented Jonathan Demme. But Dante soon wanted more. He wanted to try his hand at directing. He had to convince Corman to give him his chance.
Imagine a film school where you know that your movie is going to be playing in 100 drive-ins, in 2 months, and even if it's terrible, it's going to get released.
Many by one name, a name that he was not born with, a name that is not legally his, but a name that evokes such terror that you can remember where you were the very first time you saw Freddy.
And I walked in, and you guys know I love to talk. Greased my hair back in the bathroom in the interview area. Walked in and sat, and Wes told me the backstory. Well, it was great. I mean, Wes telling me the backstory about he and his brother and this bum on the street looking out the window, and the plot of Nightmare on Elm Street. He's telling me all this stuff, and so I didn't have to act. I just kind of locked into Wes, and I just posed a little bit. I think I was wearing all black. This was, the 80s. We all wore all black in those days. It was very new wave. And I just kind of, and I have a very high forehead when my hair is slicked back and my hair's thin, and so I look, you could imagine me bald. Wes could see how the makeup would work on my face. I have the shoulders of a 6-foot man, and I'm only 5'10", so Wes probably, I'm thinking Wes or David Miller knew that you could put makeup on me and it would still look in ratio okay. Because if anything, my head's a little too small for my body. And by putting makeup on me, I'm just about right. So I really take makeup well. All these factors.
Don Mancini is not your average horror writer. He attended prep school, was a star athlete, and had a close-knit family who encouraged and accepted his craft. But it wasn't a seamless fit into this Norman Rockwell painting.
I had a fairly conventional childhood. I wasn't locked in any closets or anything like that. So often people, when they meet people who work in horror movies, they expect you have some kind of, horrific stories, but I don't really. I was very interested in film from a very early age too, and was, exploring that and made, you know, my share of like short 8mm films. I was very into the horror genre. I was really, as a child, like really little child, like 3 years old, I learned the word shadow from watching Dark Shadows. I was very into that show. And the first R-rated movie I ever saw was The Omen, and just really into the genre from a very early age. And people often, you know, they're very suspicious of that.
Somewhere inside him, somewhere deep and very dark, he was able to create the criminally psychotic and intensely disturbed character of Chucky.
I am Chucky, the killer dog, and I dig it!
But even after watching like The Omen, I was raised Catholic, so it had a huge impression on me, but not in the way it did on most people. I identified with Damien and just totally like...
Landis, like many other great filmmakers early on, had that one moment of inspiration, that one moment when he decided movie making was for him.
I saw a movie at the Crest Theater on Westwood Boulevard in Westwood, 1957 or 8, called The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. And you'll find that most filmmakers have some movie. It's often King Kong or The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad or Touch of Evil or La Dolce Vita, some movie that sparked them, that inspired them, that was the movie. And Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, for me, I was really little. I was 7 or 8, and I really had the full theatrical experience of suspension of disbelief. I loved it. I loved it. And so I went home and asked my mother, who does that? Who makes the movie? And she said, the director. And that was very sophisticated of her. I realize in retrospect, honestly, I mean, she could have said, you know, the hairdresser. I'd have a whole different career. But she said the director, so from the time I was 8, that was what I wanted to be, was a movie director. So I had that advantage, which was knowing very clearly what I wanted to do when I grew up.
Growing up in LA, Landis had a unique advantage. His first job was not flipping burgers or being a soda jerk. It was a much more glamorous position.
I literally became a mailboy in 1967, I guess, or whenever it was.
Sean Cunningham is the mastermind behind one of the most popular horror films in history, Friday the 13th. But how hard was it to get into the business of scaring people?
My training initially had been in the theater. And then when I considered doing movies, I thought all I had to do was take a camera and photograph that which was going to be up on the stage. And in the process of doing the first movie or two that I had to do, I had to learn the big difference. You know, that was way back in 1970 or something. And I had done this sort of pseudo-documentary with an assistant editor who had been working down the hall. He was a taxi driver and a wannabe filmmaker. And we finished that film and trying to figure out what we're going to do next. And he decided, you know, we could try to do a regular movie. I said, good, great idea. And we set out to make this movie. And the guy's name was Wes Craven. And he and I decided to make a film which subsequently became known as Last House on the Left.
His theatrical beginnings might shock you, not with fear, but with fascination. How this native New Yorker ended up at Camp Crystal Lake.
You know, when I grew up, I saw the little scary films that all of us see when we were, or certainly people my age saw, which was things like, you know, Bela Lugosi.
Del Toro was born in Guadalajara, Mexico, a far cry from Hollywood. But he knew as a young child he could invent a vast world of creatures that would begin his journey into the realm of horror.
I was a really screwed up kid. But I was introvert. You know, I was a very thin, imagine that, a very thin, pale kid that buttoned his shirt all the way to the top. You know, sort of a Lovecraftian little entity. You know, and I sort of was always thinking about things and thinking about creatures and stories, and that helped me to be able to deal with the world outside, you know. But at the same time, something happened that was very useful as a person and as a writer or director, you know, I never disconnected. I was never in my own world of fantasy, or I was never one of these guys that dreams about meeting Gandalf or becoming Mr. Spock. You know, I really was looking at the world and sort of creating a cosmology that would help me understand it with creatures and monsters. You know, but I was never disconnected in my own little realm.
Growing up, Del Toro saw things no child should ever see.
I saw a lot of corpses when I was a kid. I mean, I saw my first corpse at age 4. It was a road accident.
A product of a strict Baptist upbringing, Craven had a difficult childhood, but one that shaped him into the icon he is today.
My father died when I was a kid, and I was raised by this other family during the day while my mother was working. And that guy, his name was Eddie Bilton, had an 8mm camera and was always taking 8mm films. And he also would rent them from the camera shops in those days. Used to rent little 8mm features like you know, Daredevils and all that stuff. So I was really fascinated by it, but I never thought of making them. And as you said, we were forbidden to see films, so with the exception of Walt Disney films. And I think it all just hit me at once after I got out of graduate school. I had seen To Kill a Mockingbird. I had actually snuck out of the college that I was going to that would have expelled me for going to the movies. It all sounds insane now, but and I thought the film was so fantastic. You know, it just was like, well, this can't be sinful. This is stupid, you know.
That forbidden trip to the theater made an impact on Craven, which would stay with him to this day.
I don't know. I always think that being raised the way I was raised gave me more. Certainly gave me a great love of film because they were forbidden, and that always, you know, if you forbid anybody to do anything, then it's like that becomes really a great thing to do. But also,